want to thank Ray Allen for joining us this evening. And we're so delighted that he is here and really continues in his incredible work. To many of those who are sports fans, we all know of his incredible talents on the court. And so the question is, how does a star in the NBA and a three-time three-point shooter star end up on the United States Holocaust Memorial Board? And how can you give us a little background? Because I think it's so fascinating how you began this in your early days at Connecticut.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Rabbi. Thank you, John and Linda, for thinking of me to have me be a part of this. It's fascinating. You know, I'm so inspired by so many different ideas and people across the spectrum, whether it's sports, whether it's entertainment, government, just all walks of life. There's something that we can learn from everybody. And so as a young person, you know, I grew up, my dad was in the Air Force, and we traveled all over the world. So I always had to adapt, figure out a way to fit in with everything and everybody. So I never was that person that tried to make people believe in a certain thing or idea, because I knew that there were so many different ideas and languages, and even in the same languages, you speak different dialects, and you speak, you know, there's different intonations in certain languages. And I found it fascinating as I was growing up, learning these different ways of life. You just realize they're different, but it's all the same stuff. And so for the first time in my life, you know, I traveled from California to Germany, to England, to Oklahoma, and South Carolina was the last stop that I made before I went to University of Connecticut for college. And this, for the first time in my life, was the first time that I realized that I was a Black man. And it was very eye-opening. It was scary. It was intimidating, because most of my life I lived on a military base, and for most of that time I was around people of all ethnicities. Whoever was in the military, there was no segregation or real prejudices that I had to deal with as a kid. And when I got to South Carolina, it totally like slapped me in the face, because now that was when they were telling me, the white people that I went to school with were telling me that I needed to be over there with the Black kids, and the Black kids that were there told me I wasn't Black enough because I spoke too proper. So I was somewhat in the middle, trying to figure out how to exist, how to belong. And basketball was that bridge, because once the kids realized I was good at basketball, they accepted me. They're like, oh, he's okay. And then once they accepted me, then I was the bridge for the Black community and the white community. So as I got older, you know, I became good at basketball, and I still held true to my beliefs, because I knew that this place is, I used to say to myself, how do I think the way I think? Because I can't hurt a hair on anybody's body. Like I want to bring people together. I don't want anybody to feel bad. So where does this come from? And so I get to the University of Connecticut, and I had this class film, and I had to watch this film. Never heard of it before, but it just came out. This was 1993. And I go with a tutor, and we had to do an assignment on it. And the movie was Schindler's List. And I walk out of the theater just blown away, because I thought to myself, I said, wow, everybody in the world needs to watch this film right now, because everybody in the world needs to take a lesson from Schindler, the position that he held. You know, he didn't come into it with the greatest of intent in the beginning, but then he adapted, he grew, he learned, he evolved. And so from there, I told everybody, I was like doing independent promotions for the movie, like, you got to see Schindler's List, because this is a true story. And what this man did to save this many people's lives was incredible. And, you know, even at the time, to me, Jewish was never even an issue for me. It was all about these people. Look at these people. Look what happened to these people. And so what happened as I got to the MBA, I learned that the Holocaust Museum was in DC, and my owner from Milwaukee was a contributor to the museum. So I happened to be taking a meeting with him one summer, and the meeting ended, and then I had like 3-4 hours to kill. And he suggested you should go to the museum, and I said I would love to. I zipped to the
Talking about
museum.
Senator Cole, right?
Senator Herb Cole, yes. So I zipped to the museum in 2.5 hours. And I was like, I got to come back. This place is incredible. What I learned, it just took me to a place in my mind, in my soul, that I had never been before. And so from that day forward, every time we came into DC, the museum would stay open for us because it closed at 6 every day. And I would take my team, whoever wanted to go. I said, but when we landed, the bus is going to the museum, Milwaukee, Seattle, Boston, Miami. The museum's going to be open and you guys are all welcome to come. And so I took my family there all-star weekend. We got up one morning, we went to the museum. So everybody, just like Schindler's List, needs to watch this movie. And what I've found out over all these years is, and it's been truly devastating, people say things like, why would you go there? You're not Jewish. And the first thing I say is, did you see what happened? Did you see what took place? Did you see what those people did to those people? I'm not putting labels on who the people are as much as people. Like, what if somebody did that to you or to your mom or to your sister? Like, look at it from a humanity's point of view. Like, you can't allow something like this to take place. And so in 2015, I think it was, I got a call from, I don't even know who called me, but, my agent called me. And she told me that I have been confirmed to be on the board of the Holocaust by President Obama. And, I've spent a lot of time with President Obama, and I never had any conversation whatsoever with him about any of my beliefs and where I stand as far as the Holocaust Museum is concerned, or anything of that matter. And I was just astounded. I was flabbergasted because I thought, what better place to use your voice and to talk about, humanity and anti-Semitism and racism that exists, that something that we've all dealt with every single day. It doesn't go away just because we have a Black president, or now because we have in Georgia, we have a Black senator and a Jewish senator. We're still going to deal with the same issues. We still have to continue to fight and show people that diversity only makes this country a better place. We're not taking anything from anybody. It's just giving everybody equal opportunity and firm footing in this country we all believe is a great country.
So I know you've talked about this in our conversation, you mentioned it. I know you've mentioned it a couple of times, that you've also expressed that at times you found that even within the Black community, within the Jewish community, that we sort of fall into these tribal, as you call it, situations. Yeah. Tell them a little bit about your visceral reaction, or when you got off the plane from Puerto Rico.
Well, yeah. So a lot of times, I was actually, I can't remember what year it was, but the first time I went to visit Auschwitz, we were sitting in the gas station, and we were going to Schindler's factory. And I was trying to take as many people with me as I could, just to see, because some people will never experience this. And some people are afraid, they don't want to put themselves in that position. And some people just, for traveling purposes, maybe can't afford it. So I was at this gas station, and I was posting, video, and I was taking pictures so I could show people, and hopefully encouraging people to want to travel to Poland. I think Poland is an awesome country with such great history that we all need to learn, because it helps us understand our place in history. So, a a black woman, she posted on my social media that I should be ashamed of myself. And I'm looking at her post, and so I start commenting, and she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself because you're a black man. Why are you not in Africa helping people in Africa?" And I was blown away because I couldn't believe the ignorance, that someone would say that. And she since has deleted her comment and her post, but it bothered me because I thought about how this is a sentiment of other people, because you can't get to equality if everybody thinks just for themselves. So you have to figure out a way to strip yourself from this tribalistic way of living that we all kind of experience. We've all had parents that say, date somebody from your own race or date somebody from your own religion, but then we want people to fight for us when things don't go right in society. But we're subject, and I think we're not victims, but we're proponents of that same segregation and tribalism that we want to do away with, in society all around us. So what was the example that I told you? I'm sorry, Rabbi.
No, this is good, because really what it made me think of, you talked about you'd gone to Puerto Rico with Ricky Martin, with a whole group of people. Yep. You got off the plane and was confronted by a man and said, "You're black. You're not Puerto Rican. What are you going for?" Ray, I want to ask you a question, because, and I'm interested if you could talk a little bit about this, because you have had the rare ability in everything that you do to go from understanding the particular, of the prejudice that you felt in the Carolinas as a young black man coming into, for the first time, into feeling that racism. You've had the experience of going through the United States Holocaust Memorial and see the particular hate towards the Jew and what was done. And yet you've turned that into a lesson in, when you talk about it, is about our responsibility to the whole human family, to all of humanity. What is it that has inspired you to move from the particular to the universal, if you will, about really dealing with the core of bigotry, the core of hatred?
Because I think, and this is just the way my brain works, but I always think about,
we like the way your brain works.
I always think about, what if it were me on the other side? How would I respond if somebody did something to me? Who would take care of my children? Would somebody else step up? I ask this question because we've had this issue a lot in these last 4 years. We've had this issue a lot, with immigration. And this is a question to ask yourselves and to ask your friends and family. If you went into the grocery store and you seen a 6-year-old child in the middle of the aisle crying and no parent around, the first thing I would think that all of us would do is try to help that child, that baby, find their parents. We wouldn't ask them what religion they are. We wouldn't ask them, what country are you from? We're just gonna figure out a way to help them. And I think ultimately the problems that we have in all over the world is that we refuse to see it from the other perspective, because the first thing we do is we think about ourselves, which is natural and understandable. But what I've tried to always do in approaching the situation is kind of, if you walk into a conversation or a situation, circumstance, or a problem with anybody, whether it be your spouse, whether it be your children, instead of bringing my bias, we walk and this bias is already out in front. So instead of that bias, try to remove yourself from that situation as you walk as who you are, and try and listen to what the person's telling you. Listen to what the person going through, the circumstances, because the thing that we have to realize is that everybody has a plight. Everybody has, we all want to be loved. We want to love someone. We want to raise a family. We want to earn a living. That is not something that every person in this world is trying to accomplish. And I think sometimes we get in each other's way because we want to tell everybody how that's supposed to be accomplished. And it's not for us to tell somebody how it's supposed to be accomplished based on how we grew up, because each one of us that are on this Zoom right now, we've all grown up in different ways. So if you guys seen my house, if you've seen my car, if you've seen my dog, think about, we're going to all make different choices. You know, if put in the same situation, if you had the same job, if you were playing in the NBA, all of you would choose to live in a different house or drive in a different car. That's just the beauty of life. And I think we criticize each other too much for the decisions that we decide to make based on who we are, instead of trying to get to understand and know each other. Why would they make a decision like that? Let's find a way to understand who each one of us are and why we make decisions we make. And I think every situation that I walk into, I ask that question, like, you know, tell me what you're thinking, or what you hope to accomplish from this either problem, or from this understanding, or this glory, whatever it may be. And I think if we do more of that, more listening and trying to understand people, we'll understand. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a teammate that came late to practice every day. And all of us used to always ride him, criticize him, give him a hard time. And he would get fined. And he just came every day. And we just felt like he didn't care about what we had going on, or he didn't take it seriously enough. So I had to pull him aside, and I was like, listen, let's grab lunch after practice. So we went and grabbed lunch, and, you know, I didn't ask him questions. We just started talking. And I found out that he had a younger brother that he had to take to school every day. So he couldn't get to practice on time. And he never made an excuse about it. He was just trying his damnedest every single day to break his neck to get there. And we just thought that he was a flunky, or that he didn't care, or he was just disrespecting us, but he had responsibilities. And those responsibilities he would not, shirk. So just the fact that I pulled him aside, because I really want to get down to the bottom of it and figure out why he was late, and try to help him. And in having a conversation with him, I found out. And so now I was like, I can help him out. Now I had people that can help his brother get to school so he can get there on time. And also I had to talk to him about learning to communicate. When you have issues, you have a community of people around you. Talk to us, communicate with us, let us know what you're going through, and we're going to help you. I think this is what the problem that we have. We refuse to talk to each other. We refuse to communicate. We refuse to understand why somebody would say something, do something, make a choice, a decision, whatever circumstances they're in. And that's why we get to this point where there's so much, division and bedlam and frustration. And I just try to keep an open mind and not walk into every situation with a bias.
So I'm interested. You took teammates to Auschwitz. You've taken teammates to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. You have, as I understand, you put together with a group of people, a whole group of high school students when you were with the Heat, and you took them over Thanksgiving to Auschwitz as well. When in listening, what do you think the impact, and what are the things that you heard that tell you about what we should be doing to rectify this situation and deal with racism?
Well, I think that, it's an awesome question. Last Thanksgiving, we took 16 kids from the Miami area, and only one of them was Jewish. And we typically wanted to find non-Jewish children because we knew that they weren't going to be exposed to this. We knew that it wasn't their birthright where they were going to have the opportunity. So we wanted to be able to find those kids in society, in our community, that were difference makers, were connectors, that use their social media and can talk about it. And it was amazing to see them in this position and going through this museum. As much as the things that we saw, like it was jaw dropping for a lot of these young people, being in this situation. And when we talk about how do we help, this was the one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to expose kids outside of this realm and kids that wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise. Because, the one thing that I learned from being on the board at the Holocaust Museum was everything was, I'm the one of two Black people on the board. So anytime I went to an event, it was always funny because people walk up to me and they were like, "And you're here because what got you here?" And I was like, because I'm Black. No, no, no. I was like, don't worry, it's okay. I have time to explain to you. I can sit down. I don't take offense to it because everybody, it's a question. I get it. And so the one thing that I wanted, and I think how we help this situation is to extend beyond our comfort zones, our religions, because if we continue to talk about what happened in Europe as a Jewish issue, then, around the world, around America, so many people turn in another direction and say, well, that doesn't concern me. And so now you look at, as survivors start to pass away, like, what's our message? What do we talk about, going into 2025 and 2030 to make sure that we keep people, because this has to always be remembered. This has to always be talked about. It has to be new lessons to teach the young kids when they grow up. And how do we make teaching about slavery and the Holocaust, a prerequisite in middle school or high school? Like, that should be on the agenda. We talk about world history. It shouldn't just be one passage, throughout our history, because I know I wasn't taught it in my history. In the 8th grade, they made us take South Carolina history, and it was the whole year. It was a whole textbook. And think about this: South Carolina history, one of the original 13 colonies. And not once did we talk about slavery. We talked about the men that helped build South Carolina, but we didn't talk about the fact that those men that you're telling us to glorify had slaves. So you're turning a blind eye to, a part of to history that applies to who I am, applies to all of us. Yeah, America has a lot of issues that we need to overcome, but it's things that we need to learn from. There are things that I know it's people, we're talking about taking monuments down and renaming military bases, but it should be, we have so many great Americans that have lived in the last decade, 2 decades, that we can glorify and glamorize because they've either died of war or they've given a great service. Like, that should be we should be able to reframe the narrative and continue to adapt in this country, because we have great citizens that are living now, but we can't look back on our past and be ashamed by it. We have to continue to talk about it. And I think we get to continue the conversation, but we have to always remember that it shouldn't just be about a religion. It shouldn't be about a skin color. It should just be about people.
So you got engaged in this by, uh, at UConn, somebody had you watch a film, and a piece of literature or art inspired you, and then it led you to all these things. And then your position on things gave you access, and you use that access in your, if you will, to a platform, because the uniqueness of a NBA All-Star being interested in the Holocaust Museum and taking trips to Auschwitz is a little bit unusual for what goes on in terms of interest of most of our sports heroes and sports icons. But let's fast forward to today, because you've had this universal message, that we have to care about all humanity. And we go through a summer in which we all watch the cinematic murder of George Floyd. We watched white America, for maybe the first time in a long time, was awakened to the realities that African Americans and people of color have lived through day in and day out for too long in America. How do you, what's been your take? Because I know you've asked for consistency, and I don't mean to get political in this way. It's hard not to these days, but I know you went after made comments to people who were Black Lives Matter, saying Black Lives Matter, and who you knew were strong Trump supporters. You said this is hypocrisy. So how did this summer make you feel, and what do you think are the actions that we should be taking, both personal responsibility and sort of communal responsibility?
Well, first of all, I try to explain to people, for the longest time, we've apologized for our place. You walk into, I play a lot of golf. You walk into a country club and you get looked at like as if you're not supposed to be there. Certain restaurants, you don't get seated right away. I've seen people walk in after me and get seated before me. Um, you go into stores and people, it's two ways. They either overhelp you because they think you're going to steal something, or they don't help you at all because they don't think you can buy anything in a restaurant. So what's happened over time is you develop this imposter syndrome because you've been made to feel like you don't belong. So you always make an excuse for your place. Like, oh, let me not make too much noise because I don't want to disrupt or anger anybody, or let me make sure that I do this real quick, get in and get out, so I don't take up space from anybody else. And even when people say something, racist towards us, we have to ignore it, because if we don't ignore it, you end up playing the victim role. And how many times have people told me over my life, stop using the race card, or stop using, it's not just always about you being Black. And, a lot of times it was. A lot of times that's what we were dealing with, and I couldn't, just people. So when this summer happened, the last couple of years, so many of my white friends, would come to me and apologize and say, I didn't know. And I was like, no, you knew, you just didn't want to, accept it. You didn't want to pay attention to it because you knew, how Black people were treated for a long time, not only in America, but around the world, because this is not just, this is not consist only within our borders. So it's, I think it made me excited because I knew that now the conversation was being had. And the crazy part is this conversation is so uncomfortable because people don't want to believe that there's racism. And for a lot of my friends that live in their neighborhoods, they say things, they've said things like racism doesn't exist anymore. They've said that, I've heard people tell me that racism only is back because of Barack Obama. It's his fault. And, when you hear stuff like that, I have to remind people that racism has always existed. You only feel it now more because racism has come back to the forefront because we do have a Black president, and he's in the White House. And there are a lot of white people in America that aren't happy that there's a Black president. They feel like they lost something. And you saw it with the election when Trump became president. So many people said, oh, thank God we got our country back. And I said to myself, I was like, where did they go? Like it didn't go anywhere. And so you can see like the progression of our presidents. When you think about each one we have, it gets us to the next one because people say we never want that again, those 4 years, and you keep, moving in another direction. And, how, people tell me that, I'm being too political. And the thing that I've learned, what's going on today, what's gone on these last couple of years, I just, it's hard for me to say it's about politics. This is about your moral compass. The things that have been said by the Trump administration, the things that have been accepted. You know, I've often made comparisons to him and Hitler, and I've had people that will argue me and be mad at me, and I say it's not about. I'm not talking about what you know now in history. We're talking about 80 years later what happened. What he did. 60 years later, 80 years later, what atrocities were committed. But I've read enough books about Germany, about Europe in the 1930s. And going to the museum, you understand where Europe stood in the late 1920s, and then going into the 1930s, and how Hitler came to power, and the atmosphere that took place around Germany and around Europe. So you listening how he came to power, and how he pushed people out, how he Nazified their institutions around there, and took Jewish chairmen and individuals out of board seats, and then ultimately you remove them, and then you remove them, and then all of a sudden you take their property away from them, and then you all of a sudden now they're in a concentration camp. It was a step process that took place over years. But what happened is he realized, and you can help me with this, but the building that burned down, that Hitler said that it was one of his ally, or his opponents, that then allowed him to create the Gestapo, which then in turn um, felt like it gave him more power, and then he started going after everybody. And that is why in a government we have to elect people in the Senate position, in the House of Representatives, in local government, mayors, governors. We have to represent or elect people who, one, it seems like so many rules or laws need to be changed, because no person in an elected position should be able to benefit from the stock market from which they write the laws. And two, no senator and congressman, just like a president can only serve 2 terms, they should only be able to serve a few terms, and then they have to go, because then they're going to do what's best for us and not try to stay in office for a life. I'm tired of seeing officials who follow the party script, because you go to Washington because you want to change things, and then you realize, oh, I can't change it. I got to vote this bill in first to be with the party, and it's against everything you believe in. But you have to go take this circuitous route to hopefully get to positions of power where you can start changing things you came in the office to change. But first, you got to jump on the party bandwagon.
So Ray, how do we do some of that change? Because this summer was a dramatic. It was whether it was COVID, whatever it was the horrific death of George Floyd, and the fact that once again now we have a woman who takes a young black man, teenager, and accuses him of taking his phone, because God forbid there's somebody else that has a phone that looks like mine. I mean, and the assumptions, the types of things that have gone on. And we had standing on today in front of the White House, in terms of, we had a United States representative, Mary Miller, invoke Hitler's name and say in public, to saying Hitler had it right. Whoever wins the youth, the minds of the youth, wins the future. How can somebody use Hitler as an example? I mean, and so what do we do? Because we have this moment in history. We have, 200 devices on tonight, in terms of, we have more interest now than ever in making change. What do you see as being able, because you haven't talked the talk, but you've been out there doing and walking the walk. You took people to the museum. You showed them. When you were asked to serve by the president, you didn't seek the office to go on the board. You took the office, in terms of that. When we talked to you about this, I know you have better things to do on a Wednesday night. You said yes to do this. What is it in your mind? How many boys do you have at home running around that house?
4.
4. Oh my God. So, well, you almost got your team.
Yeah, I got a golf foursome for real.
That's good. Now. So, what is it what do we need to do to make this change? What do you see that's both hopeful, and what are the things that scare you? What keeps you up?
First, I think the conversation has to be had like we're having tonight. I used to say this when I played, and it still applies now, because I still have to make sure that I keep myself physically together. I always say, if you don't use it, you lose it. So you have to if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, it doesn't change you. So we have to be, the things that we want in our lives, if the things that we wanted everybody was able to achieve, then everybody wouldn't want it. And the things that are the hardest, they're worth fighting for, can't be accomplished in a lifetime. And we think about where we've come from, the technology growth that we've had, what our ancestors didn't have compared to what we have. And we're basically, we're the bridge to the next generation. We're what history is going to be talking about, whether we sat pat or we stood out there and we used our voice. A man or woman has to be willing to plant a tree for whose shade he or she will never sit under. You think about all the great buildings, skyscrapers, bridges, airports, highways that we get to use because somebody used them. We all know, we grew up learning about the Great Wall of China, how many people died while building the wall. And when they died, they were just buried right inside the wall. I don't know if that's a wives' tale or urban legend, but that was what we were all taught. And it was like, wow, somebody gave their life to build this wall. And, there's so many things like that that take place, that exist all around the world. And it is our mission, our goal, to make this place a better place. Like, selfishness doesn't get us there. And so we have to think about the things that make us uncomfortable and challenge those things. It's the status quo, because think about everybody on this call, on this Zoom, that when you got your cell phone for the first time, think about before you got your cell phone, you didn't want a cell phone. My father-in-law used to always say, if I'm not home, they don't need to get in touch with me. Like, I don't want somebody knowing my whereabouts everywhere I go. And we've all surpassed that idea, that discomfort. It felt like it was at the time. Now we can't live without our cell phones. We adapt. We've adapted. And so what we all need to do is be willing to be uncomfortable. Like, I'm uncomfortable every day, because when I drive through the streets, I see cops, I get pulled over, cop sees me, he knows me, but even when I get pulled over, I still feel angst. I get uncomfortable every day because somebody doesn't like something I say on social media, and I have to have a conversation with somebody, and then we can agree to disagree, or somebody can say, oh man, I really didn't understand, and now I understand. Thank you for explaining it to me. But those conversations need to be had. And here it is again. This is not about me. Like, a lot of times people, if I say something, whether it's about what goes on and what went on in Europe, or what's going on in our country today, or any genocide that I've talked about over this globe, this is just me using my voice to talk about it, to start a conversation. What happens is people are so short-sighted, they want to attack me personally. Like, oh, well, why did you do this with that person? I was like, this is not about me, because I'm the vehicle for which you're receiving your information. And I think that's why people are afraid to speak out, because they feel they don't want to be indicted. They don't want to disrupt. Some people, it's uncomfortable. You feel like your family or friends are like this party and you like this party. So you want to keep the argument down. It's like, that is where that apathy is a disease, that unwillingness to do the right thing and say the right things. And think about this, because I asked this the very first time when I went to the museum. There's, I think by the rail cars, there's a picture of that the I don't know if it was one of our branches, armed forces, but they were doing a reconnaissance mission. They took a picture of Auschwitz from above, and it was on the wall. And the first thing I asked, and everybody who I took afterwards asked, and they had a date next to it, and they said, well, how come we knew about it then? How come nobody did anything? You saw it right there, and they knew, and they talked about it, and nobody did anything. And so this is kind of where we sit today. And I pose this question to everybody, because some people, we still have people living that were there, and bless their hearts that they survived and they're fighters. But some people that are living today, oh, if I was back then, I would have, I wouldn't have took any mess. And I look at them and I say, what you're doing right now is what you would have done then. Because those people that lived back then, righteous amongst nations, that knew that their families could be killed, and some people's families were. I went to a family whose home was still standing, and it was, on the verge of collapsing. They had a hole in their floor where they hid 6 members of a Jewish family, and someone told on them, and the Germans came the very next day, and on their ledger they had 10 people that were living in the house, and they came the very next day, and there were 9 people home. They took those 9 people out, and they went next door, and they got the little boy, and they made that 10, and they took them behind the barn, and they killed every one of them. And the one person that was missing was a little boy, who then grew up in the house, raised a daughter, and then his daughter and her son live in the house and showed us, and I walked down into the hole. And that family hid those 6 Jewish people, and they escaped, and they lost their lives for it. And that's the thing that we have to understand and think about what's going on today. And this is why I try my hardest to be so vocal, because I know these people that lost their lives because they were righteous, because they didn't care what the Germans said. They know that these people needed protected. And all around us, there's people that are marginalized. We got people that are put in cages, and we watched it. We've seen it. We see all the stuff going around the world. And again, just like that picture in the museum, people sat back and say, how come we didn't do anything? This is what's going on today in so many segments of our population. And if at the very least to talk about it on social media and bring it to light so people understand and know about it, because that's how you create change. Enough people talk about it, and it's in the public domain, and then government officials catch wind of it, and there's talk, and they have to do something about it. But we as constituents of this government, we can't be afraid of persecution. We have freedom of speech in this country, unlike what happened many, many years ago. So we have to be able to use our voices and say things that make us feel extremely uncomfortable, make people around us mad at us. You know how many people tell me every day, you can go on my social media, I'm at Trayfor, Trayfour, and look at my feed, everything I post. Some things you may agree, some things you may not, but look at all the hate that I get. People tell me that, curse me out, call me the N-word, tell me, the big fans of mine tell me that, I used to be a fan of yours and I'm unfollowing you. And all I said was, what happened today was a tragedy and it's un-American. And now, because I use my voice to speak against somebody and I'm not their voice, I'm not saying what they believe in, now all of a sudden they're not a fan of mine. And I responded to that kid and I said, you were never a fan of mine if you got that angry over something that I said, and my voice, what I stand for. If you are mad at me for speaking out and speaking against what's unjust, then you weren't a fan of mine in the beginning.
So Ray, how do we, you said so many things that are so powerful and beautiful. And, when you talk about us, having to have the right moral compass and also never taking our hands off the plow, so to speak. In our tradition, we say, Lo alecha hamlacha more. It's not upon me to finish the task, but neither am I am I free to desist from it. In other words, just because it's hard, I can't give up. And I think you've shown that in so many ways. You've also, I think this idea about being consistent and being a moral compass, because you're not standing up for, just what happened in the particulars of the Holocaust. You're using that as an example of how inhumanity and how insensitive and how hatred can take over. Look, today we had people go in and somebody was killed in the Capitol. Somebody was shot in the Capitol. People broke windows in the Capitol. Somebody stood, as Senator Cardin said, he said about our president. He said, you know, he gathered the tinder, he put the lighter fluid on it, and then he lit the match and he blew on the flames, and then he goes and praises the people who are putting out the fire. Yes. So we have to be consistent, and we most of all have to hold everybody accountable. So I want to ask this because I could ask my questions, but what would you say that to the community of color, and what would you say to the Jewish community about what they need to be uncomfortable about in order to move forward? What are the uncomfortable things that we have to deal with?
Well, I first, and I said this earlier, I think for all of the people in the Jewish community, it's important to understand that people do want to help. And the minute you do make it a Jewish issue, then it does push people in a opposite direction. And I think it's important to figure out a way to be all encompassing and figure out how to, to talk about what the things that you deal with, the things that you have going on in your life with other cultures, so they can be inquisitive and want to learn. In the Black community,
the same thing about the Black community?
Yes, in other words, I was going to say the same thing. In the Black community, it's the same thing. It's like, there's so much oppression. We both, between Black community and the Jewish community, we both have been oppressed for so long. And it's like we're fighting, for ourselves, but then we realize we can help each other. You look at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, there were Jews and Blacks marching together with MLK. Like, we can truly help each other because we understand struggle. We understand what it takes. But what happens is we have to decide for ourselves first, that we can help each other grow. Talking about this whole Black Lives Matter movement, so many people were saying that I understand, I vow to be different and to help and to use my voice. And for Black people, when you think about the great divide in our country, with the wage gap, with how communities look, when Black Lives will show, BLM will make a difference for so many Black people when when money starts to flow into Black communities, when schools will start to be financed better, textbooks, teachers are paid better. So education is more of a premium. And that is, it's almost like segments of our community are being left behind. And so there's a distrust amongst Black people, because you take, for example, in segments in cities in this country, when we talk about the vaccine, there are pharmacy deserts in the cities, in inner cities, where elder Black people can't even make it to a pharmacy to get a vaccine. So you have to travel across your county to go somewhere else, and then you're denied admittance, or told that you can't use it, or you don't have prescription at a certain a pharmacy. So those types of things, it's like an infrastructure reboot. And it takes, Jewish people and Black people who have struggled to understand, see eye to eye and say, this is something that we can accomplish together. And one of the things I'll tell you guys I've done is, because I think education solves a lot of our issues. When you think about people who are doing the things that they're doing or not being able to do, like when you're talking about obesity, teen pregnancy, crime, so many issues that ail us in this country, like education solves so many of these problems. And that's where I believe we truly need to start. And we as Biden takes over his administration, we have to press him on making sure that we keep diversity flowing, and we allow for programs where everybody can exist, everybody can take part, so we can learn together. Like I said earlier, we need to make sure that there's Holocaust education and education about slavery in this country, and the 1619 Project. All of our young people need to exist together. I would love to see, when Jewish kids go to Auschwitz, I love to see Black kids a part of those trips as well, because we truly can learn from each other and be taught, these ideas, and do the same thing for, making cultural trips to the west coast of Africa, where the slave trade took place. Those types of things is how we start to encourage our kids, and it's like the tribalism that we all involve ourselves in because we feel wrong, that we have to right this wrong. And I'll give you another example that you see a lot of that with the Cuban community in Miami, where they're fighting socialism because of what happened in Cuba. So they want to fight what they appear to be socialism in this country. And so it's an old world idea, and you're fighting against a yesteryear thought, and then you can't get over that. And I think the minute we start to say, okay, how do we take what we are now and start to grow? And that is with our children. That is taking our children and educating them, making them better than what we are, and taking our biases out of the picture. So we're in essence, we're corrupting our children. We're giving them our biases that they start to believe in. We're teaching them these things, and they start to believe, well, this is how my parents, is what they dealt with. And that sometimes can harbor resentment or ill will as they grow older, because, if I grew up in Cuba and my grandfather was oppressed and all of his goods were taken from him, what they're teaching their kids now, there's young people walking around saying, well, my grandfather was oppressed, so I'm not going through the socialism anymore. And I was like, we have to be better than teaching our kids. We teach them about the past, but we have to teach them how to live together in this community now, so we don't become so territorial and tribal.
Well, I think, you won't get an argument out of us, because there's Jews sit around the Passover table every year, and we said, Avadim Ainu, we were once slaves, and we have been instilled, and yet having been oppressed, we still fight for freedom. I also think that one of the things that I think, you talk about, and I think is important to recognize, is that you're an example that, and I mean this in the kindest way, is that when we have privilege, we have to maximize that privilege for good. So just in the sense, you could be an NBA player and have made whatever and done and be so self-consumed, and yet you weren't. You took what your platform and you used it to try to teach others, and of something that was passionate about it. So the Jewish community has got to understand that over time, because of the part of us that are white, have had white privilege, and we have to figure out how we use that privilege to end to make an even playing field, if you will, or at least an opportunity so that privilege works for the good of everybody and not just a distinct group. I want to turn in a minute. I'm going to open it up here. I have this conversation that we have here has been a great conversation, because it's not just been with Washington Hebrew, but it has been with a whole group of other individuals that have joined. I've been honored that my teachers are also Reverend Chris Zacharias, who I think is still on here somewhere if I can find him. I'm going to try to, if somebody gets him before me, highlight him. I know that somebody who's been doing this longer than all of us is on here, is Reverend Vernon Shannon, who's on. I want to find Beverly Goral, Beverly Goins. That was a tongue slip of somebody used to. Where's Beverly? I know she's on here. There she is. Let's add Beverly in. And there's somebody, get Chris in here. I don't know if he's still on.
Yeah, he's there. I can see him.
Somebody put him in. There we go. So I want to open it up to some of my colleagues, and I want to thank each of you for being on. I don't know if Mark is on, Reverend Thomas. Somebody put Reverend Thomas in here. I don't want to get in trouble. I do not want to get on the wrong side of Reverend Thomas. That could be trouble. And I think we've got Ayana's on here. Super. So I open it up. I've asked some questions I'd like to ask you, because, I've been doing this from my perspective. I'd love to know some of your questions that you might have of Mr. Allen. Nothing like putting people on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a question per se, but I could very well resonate with some of the points that you made. I used to work in the Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So as you were talking about the exhibits, I'm like right there with you, in my mind. But I I could also resonate with what you were saying about being a Black person who has social justice interests outside of the Black community. And for instance, when children were being taken away from people trying to immigrate into the country, I was also challenged. Well, don't you think it's enough going on with Black people? Why are you worrying about those Hispanics? And I was like, excuse me, I'm going to fight for anybody whose children are taken away from them.
Yeah.
It's about the humanity, the humanness of a person, so that really resonated with me. You know, I don't know how we need to recognize how we're weaved into the same human garment, and how we are called to fight for justice for each other. So I thank you for some of those things that you said.
Yeah, thank you, Beverly. And one thing that I would add is there somewhere along the line, we've as a Black community, we've lost the connectivity with each other, and it's we have to reestablish that. It's almost like a distrust that we have because all of us, systematically we're trying to figure out our own, trying to figure out how do we achieve and claim and grow, and everybody is trying to, like I said earlier, raise a family and have children and as a Black community, we do have to make sure that we hold each other accountable, and but at the same time we know it takes a community to raise a family and these young children, and we have to be responsible and accountable to each other. But one thing, and I've said this to every the most of the Black athletes that I know, and I want you guys to think about this. And when you look at the NBA, you look at the NFL, and you look at rap music, hip hop music, there's always this ongoing beef between our young Black men,
Mhm.
and even with the women that they try and create the beef, and it ends up selling clicks on social media. It ends up selling spots on TV, on different PTIs and all these different things, and we're always at each other's throats. But you never see that in hockey. You never see that in country music. You know, it's always, you see there's a sense of brotherhood and togetherness, and that's something that we have to heal from. I don't have any beef with anybody that I played with or against, because I understand opposition pushes you to your greatest heights. And when you allow that person to push you, like, thank you for pushing me, I wouldn't be who I am without you. And I think once we start to understand that, that's how we can coexist so much better and allow each other to achieve greatness in whatever perspective jobs that we hold.
Mr. Allen, I thank you so much for being a part of us tonight and sharing in this diverse humanity that's here. And I appreciate you sharing about the adaptability and being uncomfortable. And one of my members always talks about learning to be uncomfortable in uncomfortable situations. So let's see if you're uncomfortable. You are no longer an athlete. You're not good at any athletic skills. You don't have the network for which you are currently a part of. What would you be doing with the same morality of thinking as your brain has and is a passion for you? What would you be doing presently now? And what would you be linking? What networks would you, or organization would you be linking in?
Well, I've always said that if I didn't end up where I am, the roads that I traveled, um, and it's an interesting question because oftentimes I've tried to kind of work it over my brain because I've learned so much from being a part of a team. understanding. And even in the military, you're part of a team, because if you do something out of pocket, you can cost your dad. My dad had 6 stripes. And if I did anything out of pocket, it would cause him to lose one of those stripes. And so that stripe was, it equated to his salary. And there were 5 of us growing up. So I was like, let me not do anything to cause my dad to get in trouble, because I only have 2 pair of jeans as it is as a kid, and food was scarce. So I always felt that sense of community and family, being in the military, because all the military families stuck together. So I always wanted to fly airplanes, and that was going to be my path of trajectory. And even to this day, I'm envious of when I see a plane in the air. I'm envious when I see soldiers enlist and our troops go to war, because I always feel like it's an awesome thing to see people fight for something greater than themselves. You may die, you may never make it home, but you're going because you're fighting for the person next to you. And I don't know if this would ever fly, but I said, I think in our country, it would be awesome if to graduate from high school, you had to serve 3 months in a boot camp for all of our kids, putting kids through extreme training to teach them, the values of working hard and working with each other. I got that through being a part of a team. And the thing that I want you all to realize, and this is something I tell everybody that I come in contact with, or from a large group, or just with people in the neighborhood, is we have to understand, like, it's easy for you to see me and say, wow, he's on a team, they won the game, because at the end of the day, there's a dollar, or not a dollar, but a number associated with my work. So we have immediate feedback on if we did a good job. You won, it's 99 to 95. We won the game by 4 points. So we can have a sigh of relief and go home, eat, and everything is all good. But the thing that happens when you're an athlete is typically most guys think if you're on a team and you're a superstar athlete, you are the superstar. So when you leave the team and you go home, you still think you're that same superstar. And when you leave and you move to the community, you still think you're that same superstar. And when you're around your brothers and sisters, you still think you're that same superstar. And that is a problem, because what we have to realize is every situation that we move into, we become a different member of the team. So you may be a superstar on the team if you play a sport, but when you go home, you might be the janitor. You got to sweep up and clean behind some of these kids.
Been to my house.
Yeah. You might be a GM, you might be a president, you might be an owner, you might be something other than where you were when you left your job. And you have to understand what role that is that you feel. When you understand that role and you can switch that role when you move from your car to your home, to your community, to your workplace, it allows you to be more proficient in that job, enables you to be a superstar at that role, because you might have a part-time role, but you can do it full-time.
Thank you. Vernon, Reverend Shannon.
Yes, let me thank you, and thank you for this session. Mr. Allen, as I watched the election that took place in Georgia, I was fascinated by the enthusiasm that the Blacks had for the Jew that was running. And I wondered whether or not the fact that the Blacks and Jews had the Jews had their Holocaust, the Blacks had their enslavement, whether or not through the years, Blacks and Jews have had that in common, and whether or not they have had a special relationship because of that, and whether or not that might have had something to do with the Blacks overwhelmingly supporting the Jew on yesterday. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's exactly it. When you think about, we always joke about, people that I grew up with, friends of mine. You come from nothing. We share stories about how many pair of pants that we had growing up, or how many pair of tennis shoes that we didn't have growing up. And so we always say that, if anything bad happens to me now, like, I've been there before. Like, I've been oppressed before. I've been, I've spent nights where I didn't have dinner, not because I didn't want to be, because we couldn't afford it. You know, we laugh and joke about having a mayonnaise sandwich, or things that we had to invent to just get through the night, and put something in our bellies and then move forward. Like, so now being older, like, adversity isn't a shock to us. We've been there before. And I think that's what we see in both Warnock and Ossoff. They've both been oppressed. They come from ancestors that have been oppressed. They've dealt with stories on both sides where they know the oppression that they had to suffer, that they went through. So what it teaches us, present in the moment, is how can we ever not understand the plight of our ancestors? Thinking about, we always say things like, I know your parents probably told you this, and you probably say this to your kids, like, if you so-and-so knew this, they'd be rolling over in their graves. Like, we take that to heart because we know people paved the way for us to be where we are. And the example I always use from me as a person, and I always feel bad because whenever I see entitlement amongst any Black athlete, I think about Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, not being able to sleep in a hotel where their teammates were. Muhammad Ali got thrown in jail. He couldn't even walk down the street in a restaurant in America and eat in a restaurant, and he was thrown in jail. He was the most hated man in America at the time. But yet now everybody says he's the greatest. And I have to remind people, when it comes to Colin Kaepernick, like, you guys hate him now, but history is going to tell a different story about him. Because right now, as you see with everything that's going on, like, you can't be on the wrong side of history about this, because people will see that these things mattered when you see innocent young Black and brown people being killed by police for no reason. They didn't do anything, and people consistently say, well, what did they do wrong? Nothing. You saw it. It was all on video. Social media has helped us with that. Technology has helped us with that. So when you look at these two young men, these two young senators from Georgia, Black people see Ossoff as one of them because he too feels the struggle. He too has had the struggle. And we have hope because we know it's somebody that's not going to come in that has entitlement. That to me, when we see people who represent us in government, the entitlement is what bothers all of us, because when you preside over a group of people, a community, a state, like, entitlement is the last thing that we need. We need people to be on the ground floor. That's why we love the show Undercover Boss, because he's going to where the real people are and understanding how his business really works. That's what we want our elected officials to be able to do. And knowing that Reverend Warnock, he said today that he is going to still do church service every Sunday. Now, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of things that keep him from that on some Sundays, but the fact that he still wants to commit to doing that because he still wants to be with his people, that is what people that represent us, that's what of the people, for the people, by the people is all about.
So I don't want to skip Ayanna, but I want to interrupt with one quick question that all of you have spurred in terms of this, is that will the Black-Jewish alliance disintegrate again once the Trump administration is gone? In the sense that we've had 4 years that we've been shocked into the complacency of America to allow anti-Semitism, races. There have been more acts of prejudice and bigotry in the last 4 years than any time of keeping the records of this, against people of color, against Jews. We have been forced into an alliance, and that alliance isn't necessary, if you will, to steal the words of Sheikh Ben Baya, an alliance of virtue. It's been an alliance of necessity. And what I think both of you are talking about is an alliance of virtue, an alliance that puts us together because we believe what is right and should be right. How do we preserve that? We're on having these discussions, and we're going to go back and whatever. We're going to have an administration, and now we have both houses. We've got hegemony because of the African American vote that came out in Georgia, and because of what's happened and the hard work that's been done. We now have this. Is our alliance going to disappear and fade to the side? I ask that to all those on the screen right now, not just to Ray, but go ahead, Ray. What do you think?
Oh, I think that is a great question. And what happens is, I think there's complacency that always settles in. Think about, and I love to use correlations to things to get people to understand. So when we buy the new car, for the first week, nobody is eating in that car. Like, you curse somebody out for eating in your car. And then after a while, it kind of goes away, and you just kind of pass over, and then crumbs start to get everywhere. And then you start to lose, that luster of it, that new car feel, and your desire for that new car. It's the same thing in our relationships, our marriages. We fought so hard to get the person that we're with and that we love and that we marry. And then after a while, that person just becomes the other person. To answer your question, Rabbi, for most of us on this Zoom, it's up to us, because we have to continue to recycle our relationships. Reverend Shannon, it's important for all of us to keep this integration happening by if you think about in the Jewish community, when you're planning events, why not incorporate people from the Black church in these events, and vice versa? Like, that's how we do it, because we go off into our separate ways when we congregate, but then when there's an issue, then we say, okay, we're together. But we have to truly make this an idea that makes it a real community, so we can form and have events, once or twice a year. This is on us to create this brotherhood and this sisterhood, because we can't talk about it and then all of a sudden nothing happens and then it fizzles because we're not actually doing the work.
I concur with you, and I also think that there has been such moral injury in this country that it's going to take 10, 15, maybe 20 years to recover from the damage that the present administration has done to this country. That this alliance will be needed perhaps more than before. Long after Trump has left the office, the alliance is going to be needed to bring about some healing. There's so much anger in the country, so much anxiety, and so much depression. I think that the need will be greater beyond this administration than perhaps it is today. That if ever there were a time when there's a need for healing, for hope, now is that time. And I think that the alliance might be a wonderful instrument by which and through which healing might take place. If we work together, if we are advocates for justice and advocate for conscience, we might be the very vehicle that will enable us to overcome the moral damage that's been done by the present administration.
Thank you. Ayana, do you have a question that you'd like to share?
I think I just wanted to share an observation. I think that when I came in on the call, I was listening to how Mr. Allen said that he got acquainted with the Holocaust Museum in college, or, with Schindler's List, and then going to visit. And I was just thinking about the fact you also said that you have young children. So I think the part that's really encouraging is that, you know, we're at that age where this is where we plant those seeds of the alliance, and we plant those seeds of teaching our children not just our own histories, but also how our histories are parallel and our experiences are parallel. My daughter's 5, so I mean she's a little too young, but I mean certainly, you know, once things reopen in the city, I mean I'm thinking that's gonna be one of our stops. We're gonna make a, you know, we're gonna make sure that we make a trip there. We'll try to, you know, make sure it's age appropriate, but certainly the idea that we have to start planting those seeds when our kids are young. We have to think about ways in which we can see those alliances. And I think, as someone said, the alliances is something that has to be not just for the moment. It's a long term. It's a relationship that has to be nurtured. I think that for myself, based on my profession, I've always had alliances. You know, you just you're in the law, that's what you do. You know, Blacks and Jews work together. And I think, you know, certainly in civil rights, but, you know, obviously it has to extend beyond that professional relationship. And so I think that's where this has been very helpful, seeing it beyond just, okay, we work together because we share ideals on this particular issue. How can we, you know, how can we connect on deeper levels? So thank you.
I'll give you two points. And again, like I'm so supremely encouraged that we're having these conversations, and people, we can voice our opinions and hopefully come up with some ideas. But I also took my children with me to Auschwitz back in Thanksgiving, and you know my youngest is 7, he's 8 now, and the gentleman who I organized with thought it was a bad idea because he thought he may not get it or it may be too traumatizing for him. And I told him specifically, I said, there were kids younger than him that were killed in the Holocaust. And just like you could teach a kid to swim or you could teach them a language, you know, I don't think it's ever a time where you couldn't teach your children lessons at a young age. Like we teach them to sit down, we teach them to eat, we teach them to so many things. And this is something that we certainly can incorporate into who they are, because it becomes a part of the fabric of who they grow up to be. And my second point is, I lend myself, as I'm doing tonight, I lend myself, and John, you know, you can certainly hold me to this, but to make sure when coronavirus is hopefully eradicated and we're back to touching each other, giving each other hugs, I'm willing to put myself available to, you know, the Black and the Jewish community together, doing a talk, you know, you bring your kids, you know, something that is a communal event that allows us to commiserate together, you know, creating some type of, you know, event or activity that allows us to sit in a room together and just laugh and talk and get to be around each other and know each other. Because I think that, you know, that is a tremendous start to be able to, you know, get away from, you know, feeling that we have to be so communal all the time.
So when we all walk into the room, we all carry our different bags, our baggage, if you will. And things we perceive mean different things to us. And Mr. Allen, it is so powerful. And for me, I happened to be down. I was invited by the mayor to be there when and I think Chris and I don't know who else, others were there when the signpost was going to go up for Black Lives Matter. And I got there early. I was a little bit nervous because of coronavirus and other things, but I watched them paint Black Lives Matter on 16th Street, coming straight up to Pennsylvania Avenue. And I was standing there and I'm crying. And somebody came over to me, a young Black man came over to me, and he brought water over because he thought maybe I'd been one of the ones who'd gotten tear gas or something. And I said, he says, are you okay? Are you crying? And I said, I'm Jewish. And you could look on his face like he was saying, duh. But the reality is he listened to me, and I said, I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor. And I can't imagine what this is going to mean to your children when they see that on Pennsylvania Avenue, walking the straight and narrow up to the White House, and I give the credit to our mayor to have the courage and the tenacity and the chutzpah to do what she did, was an important moment in history. And the part of this is I didn't cry because I was a Jewish person and because my mother's a Holocaust survivor. I cried because I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a man. And all of those demand that I be compassionate to other people. Now, you're here because somebody who takes care of me, feeds me, treats me like his brother as well is John Greenblatt. I want to thank John for introducing me to Ray Allen, for having the relationship and for making the opportunity for us. And John, I don't know what, John, you have a family, you have daughters, you have a family that's of mixed race, and you have a family, and I don't know what it meant for you to see 16th Avenue, Pennsylvania Avenue, but what these are, but I want to give you a word, and I know you want to thank Ray, and then I've got a few things for closure.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. And Linda may want to also chime in, but what I really just wanted to thank Ray because, there aren't a lot of Hall of Fame basketball players who would take the time to do what you've done here tonight, and not only being generous with your time, but generous with your thought and spirit. We've become friends. Our families have become friends. We were on a UConn Foundation board together, but what we spend 98% of our time talking about is not sports, not the university. It's about these issues. And that's actually how we bonded. Ray was honored by the Connecticut chapter of the ADL, and has made this commitment. And as we've talked about these issues consistently over time, and as I've tried to find my voice through writing on things that I've been feeling but not known how to express, Ray's practiced what he preached about being the toughest opponent to make you better, because he's been probably my toughest critic while I'm writing, my toughest editor, in forcing me to understand and see things and say things that I might not have had the perspective to say without it. And so certainly on behalf of myself, as a member of the congregation and somebody who cares about this a lot, I just can't thank you enough for spending the time and being so open with us. And I will hold you to the commitment that you made post-COVID. I'm really, really pleased that we've gotten to be as close as we have, because it goes beyond just the kinds of things two guys sometimes bond over. So thank you for that. And Linda, you may want to also add some of your perspectives.
Rabbi, if it can be arranged, I would suggest that we look into the possibility of a group of our congregants going to the Holocaust Museum together, and another time going to the African American Museum of History and Culture.
I think that's
Thank
great.
you, Vernon. Those are great suggestions. Linda, go ahead.
Yes, that was going to be my suggestion also, that taking a picture, taking a leaf from Ray's experience, that we do that we find a real time once this situation with COVID is over, and we put together a group, we do some education on both sides. So we both groups know what they're going to see and what to expect, and talk about, and then come back and debrief. I think that would be an excellent step in the right direction. I really do. I think these museums exist right at our doorstep. We have a huge opportunity to make this happen, and we are people who are willing to work towards making it happen.
Well, I want to thank you all. I want to share something. I'm going to share screen, and I'm going to put something up here. Hopefully I can make this work. This may be beyond my abilities. Now I'm going to go here. We have coming up an opportunity celebrating the legacy of MLK through prayer, movement, and service. The Interfaith Shabbat service, we ask you to all join us on Zoom on the 15th at 6 p.m. We have Janelia, and the next thing is citywide, we're creating a program called Miles for Meals. I will send this to all the pastors, citywide walkathon, and the idea is to raise 18,980 pounds. That's the days that have passed since 52 years since the assassination of Martin Luther King. And the idea is that we do that, also asking if you want to make cards to give to first responders. This is all to be done because we usually have a great day of service. So we hope that you will join us on the 15th. We hope that you will either bring cans of food to Washington Hebrew or to your church, and we'll get them to shelters. There's a website. I will put this into this PowerPoint will be sent to all of the ministers on this. And it is up on our website as well. And we hope that we can come together because Ray Allen is so special. And we want to thank you because you not only have had feelings, but you actualize those feelings by doing something. And in the face of what we face today, that people have tried to take over our capital and change the destiny of America, we must stay resilient and change the destiny of America by our acts of loving kindness towards one another. This pandemic has caused a food crisis in our city like there's never been before. And we who have the opportunity should help end that food crisis. So our idea is to raise as 9.5 tons of food and to raise funds to buy food and to be able to create in all parts of the city small little blessing boxes where cans can be placed in. You can do it by going on and creating a team to walk. You can do it by bringing food to the synagogue or the church. You can do it if you can't do those, you can make cards for first responders, or we also have a program where you can pick up things to make blankets for people in shelters. Usually we have 400 or 500 of us who gather from churches from all walks of life at Washington Hebrew to give a day of service in memory of Dr. Martin Luther King and what he stood for and the principles he stood for. We are here tonight because of the principles he has stood for what's been instilled in each of us, not only by Dr. King, but what drove Dr. King. And that was faith in God. That was a belief that we're created in God's image, that we're part of one human family. I am honored to be part of your family, Ray Allen. I'm honored that you gave us the time today. And may God bless you, your family, and may we continue to be the type of community that Washington is, one that stands together, prays together, and does together, and that we will bring a better world tomorrow. Beverly, go ahead, dear.
Yeah, thank you. This is very short, but I just wanted to share this because I believe it kind of encapsulates what we've been speaking about. And it was written by Reverend Dr. Courtwright Davis, who's a theologian and professor at Howard University School of Divinity. And he says, as human beings, we share a lot in common. We stand at the center of 1, a common origin, our procreation. 2, a common predicament, the problem of life and living. 3, common ground, our basic needs. 4, common good, moral, spiritual, and cultural cooperation. And 5, common hope, a life tomorrow that is better than today.
Well, the people on this screen and the people on this call, for all those who still remain with us, you give me hope, especially to you, Ray Allen. We want to thank you for doing all that you do and for doing this. I want to share at the very end, if I've got this, I hope I have it up, a small piece that Ray Allen did that I think is worth seeing. It is excellent, and it's something that we should all aspire to ask these questions.
Why do we learn about the Holocaust? In today's world, it's more.
Whoops. hopefully this is going to work.
It is possible for them to do what is right.
I've asked myself a lot of tough questions about the Holocaust. What's your question?
How could this have happened? How could human beings be so cruel to one another? Why? Why is it so easy to teach people to hate?
How does someone go from being a neighbor or a friend,
parent or a husband or wife at home, and then do that to other people?
What would you do in that moment? Is there a way for me to change the future based on what I've seen in the past?
Do you want to help break through ignorance and the divisions that are plaguing our society? Start by asking the questions. Ask your question.
We've asked our questions, and now it's time for us to give our answers by what we choose to do. Ray Allen, we thank you, not only for what you did tonight, but for what you continue to do. To my colleagues who've helped me in this endeavor, thank you so much for being here tonight. And to John and Linda, thank you for sharing your friendship with Ray, with the congregation, and for helping us do this. And to all of you that were on this, may tomorrow bring a better hope, a better day, and let's do what we need to do. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.